So welcome everybody. It's really great to have you all here today. This is the second workshop that we're running on the Women in Innovation application, and giving you some really practical handy hints on how to sort of answer the questions in the project. So the rules for this session is that it's very simple. No silly questions. Please type any questions you've got in the box, and we'll review them as we go along. And then at the end, we'll do a sort of a Q&A, and then I'll ask you to put your hands up for that so I can see who's got a question to ask. Feel free to switch off the Zoom camera and just listen in. It's a long session. You might want to also make notes with it, so please do that. I'll ask you to remain on mute as well. And I'd also recommend, for those of you who didn't listen to or were unable to listen to my first session, to go and listen to that. It was another hour workshop with my colleague Matt, and that will give you a really good sort of introduction to the first two questions on the application and how to approach those. And that will sort of, this workshop is really building up on that. And there's an assumption that you understand some of the tasks and activities from workshop 1 in order to complete workshop 2. But at this point, I am going to ask a couple of my colleagues who are here today to introduce themselves. So first of all, I'd like to ask Neil to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Neil Calder. I've for the last 15 years or so, I've been working as an independent consultant, and increasingly with Innovate UK. So I've done many hundreds of applications and many dozens of projects as a monitoring officer. So I know it from, in fact, I know it from all three sides, because I was also in my background, I've also handled public funding and run projects as well. So I'm here to provide a bit of the background.
Neil's actually a lot more than that. Neil's going to really bring it all to life, because he actually has to assess and support projects as they're running on delivering against all these work activities. So it's fantastic to have Neil on board. Rachel, I'd also like you to come and say hello.
Hi everyone, and it's lovely to have every one of you on the call today. You're welcome. So I'm Rachel Obrike, and I'm Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Program Lead, and I look after the targeted programs. So one of the programs would be Women in Innovation Program, and we'll be looking forward to support you during the time of your program when you've joined. Thank you, everyone, and it's a fantastic session ahead. You're welcome.
There has been a quick question in the meeting. The recordings are on the Women in Innovation page for the KTN. The links are on there. I think the first one went live yesterday straight away, so you should be able to access it there. If you're having problems, then just drop an email at the end and we'll see what we can do. So welcome everyone. And on to the agenda. What are we going to be doing today? So the first thing we want to do is to frame where we are and what this program is about. So the award is for innovators that are looking to scale and grow their innovative company, and they're looking to carry out an innovative project. But it's also about you as an individual and what you're going to gain and get from this, and what it is that you are going to do to the women in innovation community and other entrepreneurs out there in context of being a role model and a future leader. And I think the important message for me, I'll emphasize beforehand, is that you do not have to be the finished product. This is very much about you becoming a future leader, having the vision of what it is you want to be and where you're going with your business. So, we're not excluding anybody. It's actually about including and giving you the opportunity to be able to do that within your company and your chosen field. So the aim of this workshop is to provide you with insights and tools on how to address questions. And we're going to break this down into how to do your costed work packages. So you've got 12 months to spend £50,000. And the work packages are not just about using the grant, they are also about using the additional support and resources that you're getting from Innovate UK. So Innovate UK want to really understand how you plan to use the whole package of support that Women in Innovation is giving you. Remember, this is about you getting both your hard skills that you need in business, so the funding, the finance, understanding how to do practical things like it could be around marketing, sales, intellectual property, but it's also about you as an individual and how you're going to use those other activities to grow as a future leader. We're going to go through how to prepare a Gantt chart from those work packages, what sort of activities to include, and how to use this as an ongoing planning and reporting tool. That's when Neil really comes into the strength. What can happen with these things is they can act as a barrier to you doing work rather than a way of actually as a tool to support you. And then the other thing that we just want to bring up as well is if you're doing any subcontracting, just thinking about how you're managing collaborators and suppliers. We'll bring that up for some of you that's relevant, some of you it isn't. The funding, you might have sort of additional funding and grants and resources you're putting in. That's the additionality that you would have described, so the value for money in the previous activities, but you also can capture them in this work packages side of things. So we will talk about that. We will also cover that in the third workshop, which is around risk and risk assessments, and how that could impact on what you're doing. So the application structure, it's a different application to previous years, and they very much, Innovate UK have listened to the feedback from all of you around how to make it more accessible and more approachable for a more diverse group of applicants. So you've got the application questions, the video pitch, and then the finances. It has to be measurable and accountable. This is what you do with public sector funding, and Treasury needs to know what you're doing. But we're trying to make those applications a lot more simple and transparent, and hopefully this workshop will help you in some of those aspects. Don't leave it to the last minute. Closing is at 11 a.m. If you try to submit 2 minutes beforehand, it's not going to happen. It'll crash. The whole system will crash. So I do say always submit in plenty of time, work through. I know that about 90% of you will try to do it on the last day from breakfast onwards, but please do try to do it as soon as possible. Read the guidance and the questions, make bullet points, keywords, capture your initial thoughts and identify your gaps. So as you go through the application, all of the questions, make a note. So my recommendation was I put things on Post-its so I can see them visually and I can move them around, because something that I might read in question 1 might really resonate in question 2, or will actually be important for question 9 or 10 or whatever. So I can duplicate even those Post-its and say, this is relevant, this is what I need. Any gaps you've got, any things that you know you need to work on, don't leave it to the last moment. Do the difficult questions first. Get those out of the way. Don't focus on what's easy, because you'll end up reading and rereading the easy stuff and leaving the difficult stuff to the last minute. And that's very much as do as I say, not as I do suggestion, because I know how tough it can be. And the last thing is give yourself enough time to review before you submit. I would suggest that you want to have most of your application done at least 2 weeks before the closing date. And then you want to have a few days where you don't look at it and you just don't think about it, and you go and look at it with a fresh mind, fresh pair of eyes. Get other people to look and review it, show them what the key points are that you're trying to make or what the questions are asking, and say, have I answered that? And be really open to that feedback and reflect on what's being asked for and what's being said.
Yeah, actually, that's an important point that I'll dip in on here, Anna. It is very good to be able, everybody's got somebody they can call on who kind of knows a bit of the context, but not the detail. You can get too close to the detail. You can start to believe your own press. It is actually very good, very helpful to be able to put your draft in front of somebody and to be able to see if you can convince them, because realistically you're going to convince 5 other strangers on this, so it's good to get that rehearsal out the way early.
It's a very good point. Thanks, Neil. So just a quick summary. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. The application is both an exam and a story. So we're looking for a narrative. We're looking for a compelling narrative. There are keywords, and answers are actually all in the questions. And obviously that's what I'll be doing to break that down for you. There is technique to answering questions. And there is a way and a style to do that, but it's also about having a story to tell. And this is very much, as I've said beforehand, this is about not just about your innovation, your business. This is about funding you as an individual as well. And I think what I'd like to emphasize here, this is something I've seen with the young innovators and women in innovation. Quite often when they approach the application, they approach it as if you're funding the business. Please, it's not the business that we're funding. It is very much that innovative piece of work that you want to do that's going to help your business transition from one stage and one phase to another. As I said, you don't have to be the finished product. We're not looking for you suddenly to go out there and be able to sell or be ready. It could be that at the end of it, you've got an MVP or you've got a prototype that you can go out and speak to people, and that can lead you to be able to engage with customers, validate, evaluate, whatever. It's really important that you tell us how this is going to help you transition over the 12 months. And as we said, it's about you and your business. There are actually only 5 scored questions, and you've got some appendices. There is fixed time. That's for your presentation. It's a fixed time. When they finish the recording in 3 minutes, they will stop the recording to the assessors. I know that happens because I was there with the young innovators. And also you've got the word count, which is variable. I've put what the word count is in my slides, but check, I'm only human and I can make mistakes. And I think the important thing for me to really think about when you're writing this is think about what impression you will make. The first questions are not scored, but there's a description, there's a public description. I, as an assessor, I'm going to be reading that and I want to know what the project's about. I want to be wowed. So do think about what you're going to write, how you're going to introduce, and do put the effort in, even though they're not scored. As we said,
suggestion here, Emma, and the I think I've given this advice many times. The first question, so the first sentence to that summary actually should contextualize the whole thing, and I would suggest something like, "I want to A, whatever that is, in order to B, because of C." That gives you the activity. It gives you your overall context, and it gives you your endpoint.
Thank you. So what would I say is think about your writing style. For those of you who are not used to writing for grants and applications, what we recommend is that kind of editorial style. If you've ever read The Economist, it's basically a magazine for sort of business and sort of information magazine where it takes very complex political, societal, sort of social activities that are going on around the world, and they basically break it down into really kind of like manageable bite-size storytelling to give you a context and understanding. And they use a really nice style. It's kind of 9 to 10, no more than 12, 13 words sentences, don't have loads of brackets, don't have loads of parentheses, and you know, there's that whole kind of active tense, you know, which is really, really important when you're telling your story. So sort of think about that really punchy style when you're telling your story, when you're writing your application. Lastly, the public description, that's going to be published only if you're successful. And there is the gateway question, which is around scope. Now, we do have a lot of questions around scope. If you are not sure whether you're in scope or not, please contact the competitions team. You will come through to Rachel or one of her colleagues at Innovate UK. So read the scope and make sure when you write your application that you are writing it in context of the scope. That, as I said, it is a gateway question. It'd be a shame that you go through and put the whole application in, and then the way you've positioned it and what you've done, you're out of scope. Neil, is there anything to add there?
No, it's good to be able to actually go through the bullet points, and if there's specific highlighted deliverables that are required associated with the scope, then address them in turn. So it's how does your idea, your application fit with the specific competition, not what is it.
Thanks. So as we've said, just a reminder, this application is around not only your technology, but your potential to be a leader and a role model to inspire other women. So really think about what activities you are going to do, which are going to help you achieve your goals as a leader in your field and as a female founder. As I've emphasized already, you do not have to be the finished product. And what we're offering in this program is a lot of additional skills, which you are going to be able to take on board and use to drive your business. So starting point that we have, and this is from workshop 1, is that you've identified what your innovation is. You've captured the tasks and the activities that are sitting around the proposed program of work. Remember, it's over 12 months. And you've got a start date and a finish date. So when you write your project plan, when you start the tasks, make sure that you are within the scope of the application around that. And you've also identified where the risks are within your research aim. That's the other thing, Innovate UK funding is funding risky opportunities and technologies. There's got to be a justification as to why public sector funding is required in order to move this innovation along.
One of the little things I've scribbled down, Emma, probably appropriate to chuck it in here now, and that is really the nature of innovation grant funding is to allow you to get it wrong, not necessarily to get it right. The conventional business funding should align things and allow you to get it right. And this is where I think Emma mentioned don't write this from the context of your business, the development of your business. It's a specific set of tasks that, if only we could, such and such. It's to get it wrong, to allow you to get it wrong rather than to get it right.
Yeah. That's a really important point. And the other thing I'd say is review the non-grant support that's available and understand how you'll benefit from this. So actually sort of really think about this. Don't just throw it together. Really think about what is it that I'm going to be? How am I going to be? Where am I now? Where am I going to be in the future? So I'm just going to break down this session now into the use of the awards and look at the first two questions before we go on to the tools. So use of the award, this is about you telling us how you're going to use the grant and the support on offer and what skills and capabilities you need to develop professionally to be a future leader. These are the things that we're pulling out. So if you look at the application, it's 16% of the project funding, and they are looking, there's actually 3 areas that they're looking for in this question. It's quite a detailed question and explanation. So the first thing is about the grant and the non-grant portion of the support you're getting. So you need to fully explain how you plan to use that non-grant package of support to add value to your work and to develop yourself as a leader. So as we said, look at the package of support that's under the funding section of eligibility. What expert advice are you most interested in and why? So these are identifying the areas where you particularly would like to grow or develop or get skills. How does that align to your business goals? And if you're looking to access world-leading facilities and equipment, give us details about what you're looking for and why. The reason why we're asking these questions is also around additionality. And it's really, really important that you are able to demonstrate that it's not just about the 50K and having a label. It's about the real additionality and value that you're getting. As we've said, it's just a fixed amount for 50K funding. So what you can do is sort of look and cost the activity, and we'll talk about that later. The second part of that question 9 is around collaborations and resources. So with who are you doing this, and what is it that you're going to do with those people if you're working with them? So who do you need to work with to successfully execute your project, or to carry out the activities that you're going to outline in your work packages? If there are critical internal or external parties that you need to work with, let us know. So if you're working within the organization and you're going to have access to other team members and capabilities and facilities, let us know that you've got that. It could be as well that you might have want to think about letters of support or intent, or the fact that you've had previous working experience with these people, and you know that they are perfect to work with because you successfully delivered with those subcontractors or within those external parties. If
What I
you
would
are,
say, I think,
yes,
I mean, me to add some commentary on the value of things like letters of support. The most valuable, the most valuable evidence like that is specific. A general, wish you well kind of letter actually doesn't really add very much in terms of adding up the momentum here. If there is something specific that you need to access, or it may be availability of testing, trialing facilities or something, these are the main sort of things. Then if you can gather some evidence that is specific, this will be sitting within the annexes.
Yeah, I think you'd probably have to refer to Innovate UK about where particularly they would want that to be, because it's not a requirement on this application, but it's something that's useful to have. I think particularly if you're going to access some large facilities, you can even say that we have letters of support, but yeah. I think I'd refer to Rachel, and maybe that's something we can come back to, Rachel, for the application.
I think again, this is there's a few themes that are coming up again and again with this, or certainly that I'm seeing again and again. Number one is the dynamic nature of this. It's not about a static position. It's about dynamicism and what changes as a consequence of the project. And the second point here is, and certainly from the assessor's perspective, I wouldn't expect necessarily to have an entirely costed, all the subcon elements necessarily right on day one, because you probably want to change that anyway. But what you do need to convey is that you've thought about it sufficiently. Yeah. That if there's something key, you've got a way to do it.
Yeah. There's a question that's just come up about are all institutions partners eligible? If they are in the UK, and you can say why they're the best people to work with. If you're going overseas, then you really have to have a good justification. Now, I can give you an example of one where the difference was between subcontracting a piece of work in the UK to a contract research organization that were going to have to buy in all the capabilities, and that project was costed up, I think, something like over £100,000 in the UK to do it. And then the external collaborator in the US, which was the world leader on it, they could do the same piece of work with £10,000 because they literally just had all the components there and they had the know-how. And that was a sort of eligible disparity in funding. We can say, absolutely, this is the right people and the right community to work with, because that's where the knowledge is. And that is actually a real project that I looked at for one of the Innovate UK grants. So if you're going overseas, you really have to have a very, very good justification. Typical areas can be quite often around doing the beta version of a software, where actually a lot of that initial sort of coding and stuff can be done much more cheaply overseas. But you, again, competitions team just to check through if you're subcontracting around that and what they're looking for. So the third part of the question 9 is around project management, which we will go into a little bit more detail later on. And this is where you've got your appendices that you can put in for the project plan or a Gantt chart. And this is really around how you are planning for success. So we're going to give you this money, we're going to give you all this support, you know what it is you want to do, but can you actually break it down into chunks of activities that are going to be successful? So at the end of it, you're going to deliver. And quite often I see projects where I can see that there are a lot of things that go so far and they peter out. And at the end of it, you've got lots of things completed, but not one big chunky valuable milestone that's been achieved, and then you just need to go and get some more funding at the end of it. And that's quite often a mistake that people make when they're first writing applications, because they think of it, oh, I'm going to move my business along, rather than I'm going to successfully deliver an innovation milestone. And I think this is again back to the difference between funding your business and funding an activity with a milestone within your business. So you need to keep it on track. You need to have tools and mechanisms that you're going to ensure successful delivery. So what are the main risks and uncertainties of your project if you're delivering that over 12 months? And they can be anything from technical, commercial, management risks, environmental, could be legislation that's coming along the way, or legislation discussions that you need to have as part of your work package. These are the sort of things that we're going to capture, and we'll go into a little bit more detail, but this is very much around management and success. And Neil, I don't know if there's anything you want to add there before I move on to the next slide.
Yeah, I think we'll come on to it later on, but
Yeah, so okay,
I would say the key thing here is deliverables. It's the bits that you need to achieve, how you define the horizon points that you get to.
Yeah. So handy hints on what to include. You're going to have an introduction to you and your business needs. There's going to be specific activities. So keywords are cost of each activity and value for money. So my hint is, what are you doing and why? Make a list of what you're going to deliver and how they will be delivered. And that could be people or processes or equipment and things. So start making that list. Applications are all about lists and capturing all that information. If you're working with subcontractors or specialist resources, you need to, the keywords in the application are important internal or external parties and access. So have you had previous working relationships with them? What experience do they have in the area? What letters of support, can you bring in, or that are useful to these, to you in evidencing this? Because what we're asking for, and this is what we said in the workshop 1, is show us, don't tell us. We want evidence, and that's the really important thing. So for all Innovate UK applications, it's show, not tell. It's really important. And then project management, keywords, keep on track, tools, mechanisms. So my handy hint is project plans. What meetings are you going to have? How are you going to have those meetings? Frequency, who with? What digital tools are you using for collaboration? Who are the work package leads? Is it you going to be doing everything? Or are you going to be managing a flat system? Are you going to be working within a system? Tell us around how the mechanisms are going to work and how you're going to be supporting that.
I think there is a key point here, because one of the things, in fact, 12 months is not a long time. Some recent competitions that rushed money out in the wake of various sort of COVID things have demonstrated that. And one of the key things there, actually, you've got various project management tools that I've been going through. And of course, there's some protocols such as Prince2, which are fairly well recognized, or Agile, or whatever, sprints if you're working in certain technology sectors. But there should be a reasonable demonstration here of how the strings are being pulled, who's in control, who has managerial authority for things. And one of the key things that I would always look for within this is how you make decisions, because that's a very key part of the running of the whole thing. Your plans, first of all, the only thing I can say definitely is that the project won't take the course that you set out initially. Something will happen. And it's the ability to make dynamic changes. There was a question that I saw, Emma, regarding additional funding.
Yeah, is that the investment one from Gala?
Yeah, it was in the back of my mind.
Private investment, how the money's going to be used separately.
Yeah, it's the back of my mind here, and that is that this is a fixed sum, 50k, that's not to say that the project itself is necessarily 50k's worth of activity. You know, these are things that are always being set within a wider context. And I know there's a compressed format here. If this was a much larger project format, then I'd have hoped or be expecting to see some sort of a larger route map, and you see where this project fits. You know, the whole thing might be costed at $1 million, but this project's only 50k's worth of it. But if you're funding stuff yourself outside of this, then I think it's important to state it. But
that's the additionality that we're talking about. This is the value add. This 50k allows us to do this, which de-risks this particular portion of it, which means that we can use these funds to run the business, pay the staff costs, and, you know, do these other bits and pieces. You know, an investor is investing in the business. Innovate UK is investing in the project, in the R&D. And I think that's the way to differentiate what that is. And again, if you've got some questions around that, then we can have a look at that. And the additionality is it accelerates your business. It allows you to do something and to de-risk something along the way. And that's what we're kind of looking for in the justification and what you're writing in there. So just moving on now to the next question. We may have missed some other questions. We will go back and review everything. So for that. So somebody's asked for live transcription to be enabled for the meeting. I will enable that. That should be the closed captions, shouldn't it? That will come up. So let me just see that. Hopefully that will work for you. So vision. So we ask you in this application to describe your vision for your business. And I think it's a really important reflection point for you. So your vision for your business and timelines of the award is the question that's being asked. So what I would like you to do is to sort of reflect on, where is your business going? Why now to get that funding? And why now is not just the funding for the business, but also for you. So yes, you may have got that investment funding, but actually on top of that investment funding, for really me to be able to exploit it, I need to build all these other skills and capabilities. I need to be able to do all of these other things, all these other activities that I'm going to identify. There are 600 words, 16% of the total value of the scoring. So there's a lot of effort and a lot of information they're asking for, a lot of words, and the weighting is quite an interesting weighting. They also break it down into 2 parts. So the first one is about vision, status, and metrics, and the second one is around your next steps. So we'll start off with the first part of the question, which is, what is your vision for where you see your business in the future? What does success look like, and how it will be measured? So you need to think about, what are the appropriate measures of success for your business? And again, this is where we'll go into the project plan, the Gantt charts, and think about that. You need to think about the outputs that you expect from the project. Now, it could be a report, it could be a demonstrator, it could be an MVP, it could be know-how, it could be a new process, product or service, or a design. We don't care. We just need to know that the way you've planned your project, it's going to be achievable, and that you are managing the workflow and the processes in such a way that you will be able to deliver that over that 12-month period of time.
I think actually, Emma, if I can just sort of skip back to the previous bullet point there, I think that's, I would sort of have that massively highlighted. It certainly, I think it's one of the most common failings or omissions that I see in applications, where there, for example, is a definition or an intention to achieve better, but it doesn't actually really tell you what better should be, or what it needs to be, or, you know, if you can cross a certain threshold and be into, you know, fresh territory with this thing. I think that point about defining success is is incredibly important. Also, I think that should be right up, some of that text should be right up in your summary, which I think starts to, again, give the narrative all the way through.
Yeah, very good points actually there. Thanks, Neil. And as you know, a lot of projects where it's public sector funding, its measurement of success is what you need to evidence, and that's what evidences goes all the way up to Treasury and determines how much funding gets cascaded down. So I think it's very important to highlight that across the board, not just for the project, but the importance of that is for any grants that you might apply for, not just this competition. So the other things that we're looking at is you have identified in previous questions what the need, the challenge, or the opportunity is. So you need to actually align your outcomes to that targeted need. So, you know, going back to linking it to those previous questions that you've answered that we discussed in the first workshop. We need to know where your business is now and where it's going to take you. And as we've said, it's about the added value to the business and why it's the right time for you to do that. So those are the key words that are being highlighted in the first part. And in the second part, it's around your next steps. So how do you plan to protect and exploit the outputs of your project? Now, not all of you are going to be doing something which is around patenting, but you could have designs, you could have copyright, it could be allowing you to determine what business model you should be working to deliver your innovation. So we know some people who are planning to apply who are social enterprises, and those kind of metrics might be more relevant and more important to them, which is around the business model, the people that they're engaging with, or the community, or the societal issue that they're addressing with that social enterprise. The other thing that's really important to mention, and please do not underplay this and needs to go in there, is what impact do political, societal, regulatory, ethical issues have on what you're doing? There is very little that we do in this world today that does not fall under one or is influenced by one of these categories and criteria. And I think it's very important. I mean, we can just see around, you know, the impact of COVID, from the approach in vaccinating people to who should be vaccinated to how you manage business as usual going forward. They've all got some really huge ethical, societal, as well as political ramifications. You might be that you need to have ISO standards in order to move on and be able to achieve some of the things you do. It might be that you're working towards those, you're trying to understand what they are. For those of you who are in the fintech sector, quite often you might actually be working with a regulatory body to say, well, how does this fit into the current regulatory standards, or do we need to have some new criteria? And we saw that a lot with the open banking and innovations with open banking that came through. And a lot of the projects I work with in that area spend quite a lot of time just trying to engage with the regulatory bodies to understand how they sat in that new and upcoming regulatory framework. So let us know about it. And then what you expect to do after the award. So remember, this is about you being a future leader and you taking this forward and onwards. So this is not just about the technology and your innovation in your business, but also about you. So don't forget to include that in your answer. You can include any details of public or private support received to date, and that's where probably your letters of intent can go in there. And graphics to illustrate the vision of your business, and that could be both a PDF as a PDF on 1A4. Now, one of the things that I would say around how we're going to illustrate the vision, we'll cover that a little later on, but there are different ways that you can do that. So again, handy hints. What does the future and success look like? Outcomes and impacts. So the hint is, where are you now and where will you be? They're asking you where you're going to be at the end of 12 months, but where you're going to be in next 12 months, in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years time. You know, where is this going to take your business? So how are you going to measure success? Is it around funding, leveraging investment? Is it around customer engagement, testing, MVPs, sales, whatever is relevant for you at the stage you're at? And remember, again, I'll emphasize, you don't have to be the finished product. It's about moving you from one stage, from one phase to the next phase. Challenging current state of the art. Keywords is target the need, approach, outputs, exploit, next steps. So how are you going to use the results to progress the business is really what you're answering there.
I think actually that again is an important point that I'd like to stress here. That is that I think this is, and a successful application should lift it beyond business as usual. It shouldn't just be more of the same. There should be a really challenging thing sitting at the heart of this. And that's why I encapsulated it as, if only we could, whatever. And that really sets the tone for this, I think. This was articulated to me by one of the other innovation leads recently as challenging the orthodoxy.
It's a good way of putting it. And then the other thing here is why now? Why? You are ready now. So what achievements have you done to date? What added value is this competition going to have for you? And how does that allow you to exploit what you're doing? And by exploit, we mean sort of move your business on and raise the profile of your technology, yourself, the problem you're solving, whatever. So don't forget around intellectual property protection, any regulation and ethical considerations as well when you talk about this. So I think those are the key kind of drivers for that question. And the graphic to illustrate your vision. So this can be quite a tough one. A picture says more than any text. You've got 600 words, but how can you actually visually summarize what it is? I think a timeline with milestones to date and milestones for the future can really work well. You can put in technical, commercial, and any regulatory milestones that you've achieved or activities that you've done, whatever you think is going to tell your story well. But Neil, what's your thoughts about what's good?
It should highlight, I mean, the really good graphics that I've seen in the past have provided context actually, and bearing in mind also that the assessor probably will not be exactly specialist in what you're doing. I'd regard myself as a specialist in technologies rather than any specific technology, but to provide to a competent generalist the real nub of what it is that you're wanting to achieve. I think that's where you can really bring it to life here.
Thank you. So work packages. I've seen some questions which we'll go back to a little bit later because they're going to take a while to answer. So we'll do that in context of all of the workshop information. So work packages. So now we're getting onto the nuts and bolts of what is a work package and how do you make a Gantt chart out of that as well. So work packages is really how the overall project is structured, and it's the delivery broken down into tasks. That's what we're looking for. So in a grant application, it's really important and essential, in fact, to structure the research proposal into work packages. Whatever you do, you need to break it down. The assessor can then see if the proposal is logical, achievable, appropriate. It makes it really transparent where the added value and the benefits are, because you can bring those in. And it also tells us what the grant money is going to buy. What is it that we're going to see at the end of that? So what is a work package? It's a planning tool. It's a set of tasks with an output that's linked to your research aim. And it can be a milestone or components of a milestone. The activities should be costed and you can demonstrate added value when you cost them. They'll have a time component and quite often interdependencies. So you have to finish one task before you can start another. And they'll include technical and commercial activities. and they will in this application anticipate non-grant outputs too. You're worth including in what you're doing. So in context of the proposal, the questions we're asking, is it realistic, achievable, and measurable? And Neil, as an assessment and monitoring officer, how much time do you spend looking at these?
Quite a bit, actually, because this is really the work package definition, and going back again, fairly standard comments that I find myself making, or criticisms making, about applications, is that the assessor can't see what would happen during the course of the project. I think I'm not sure if we cover it. There is a number of questions about, how many work packages are good. I would say they're the major chunks of activity. I think a work package, for me, certainly, is more about a discrete activity thread. If your Gantt chart, if your schedule looks like everything starts on day 1 and everything finishes on, at the end of month 12, then that's probably wrong. In the same way, if you've got a very discrete waterfall that has the whole thing broken down into months, then I think that's wrong as well. The key things that I look for within the work package definition is a really good definition or description of what the objective is, what needs to come out of it. And that leads straight into we've used the terms deliverables, milestones, etc. A deliverable can be a decision that you make. And actually, this is again, 12 months isn't a long time. I'm thinking I'd expect to see maybe 4 or 5 work packages, things that sit within that. If you've got 20, then I think you've got too much complexity there. You're not going to be able to manage it. In the same way, you're not going to solve the problems of the world with 12 months and 50K. So be realistic about it.
And that's where the agile approach to doing things, you can actually, within a work package, you can still work agile. You've got a set of tasks that need to be done. You're going to be iterating, but the outputs of that is, decision tree A, B, C, and if I get B, then I go down the next one. So you need to give that. You don't need to be so prescriptive that you can't have these different ways of working depending on, the work that you're doing. And obviously you have to respond to the outputs of your research. Remember, this is money where you're allowed to fail. The whole point you're doing this is because there's research funding, there's a risk associated with it, and we need to fund you because we want you to get it right. But if it's not the right approach, then you go and find another way of doing it. And, not all research and not all projects are going to be successful the first approach. So basically there's a hierarchy to work packages. So you will have an overall aim of what you're trying to achieve. So that's the Women Innovation application, and you've got an aim within that, what you're trying to do. You'll have a set of objectives, overall objectives that you're trying to deliver. And I would say you've got probably some R&D and some personal objectives. And then you'll have underneath that a set of tasks that are going to allow you to meet that objective. Again, you don't have to be too prescriptive, not too much detail around that. But from a planning point of view, you would definitely put resources and time into there and think about who you need to engage with, what dependencies you've got in there. You need to know those. And then what you will have is a deliverable. So that's going to be specific to that particular work package task, an objective. So it could be a series of tasks to give you a deliverable. So you could have a set of activities, and the end of that, I'm going to have an MVP. and that MVP is one bit. Or I could have the task could be a set of me developing a set of features which then get embedded in the MVP. And then I've got another task which is saying I'm going to build an API that's going to sit over a data set, which is then going to feed into my MVP. And these are the tasks that I need to do. And then my personal development objective is I'm going to be engaging with these particular events, or I'm going to meet these particular people. It could be business development, it could be personal growth. You could also have some commercial objectives as well, that when I've got this MVP, I can now go out and I can speak to the regulatory body because I can show them how it works, and therefore they can tell me what I need to do. So you will know what's appropriate to you, and there will be an outcome that comes from that. So what happens when this research is completed? What's the outcome of that? And that's where you can then link that as well to your milestones. And you may have within each of these, a whole set of milestones. Within one deliverable, you can have 1 or 2 milestones, or it could be just the one that you have. What you need to be careful of is where tasks are dependent on collaborations or subcontractors, where there's specific resources or risks. And if you've got a task like that, what I would do is I'd give it a red, amber, green, depending on what my risk is, just to start capturing where I see the risk in that task. And actually, I can't do task 2.2 until deliverable 1 has been completed. So I can carry on with task 2.1 and 2.3, but actually 2.2 is dependent on an output from deliverable 1. And you can use that to thinking about how you manage your resources if things are a little bit behind time, and how you project plan it. And that's a really important way of capturing that information. And then when you've got that hierarchy of your work packages, you can then convert that into a Gantt chart. So Neil, would you like to talk about what you capture in Gantt charts and the deliverables and things?
This, and really there's a few things that I certainly look for within this, and we'll deal with first the application stage, and secondly what actually happens during a running project. The key thing here should be that it captures the main activity streams. There should be nothing that goes on within the project that you can't hang on one of these hooks, which means it's controlled. I think there's an earlier point about question about agile management, but even that actually happens within bounds. You have an idea of what you're going to get from the end of it. You can plan in to have a number of sprints or something, or cycles. If you're talking about spiral development or something, then you can plan that in. It, but you're not going to get many within the space of 12 months. The classic ones usually are that you've got a front-loaded bit of specification, then usually trialing a number of things, trial the ideas out, and then gather it together in some sort of cohesive thing at the end. I think to have some sort of a trialing phase or a demonstration certainly provides that level of integration and focus.
So we had a very good question, and thanks for pulling me up on that. What is an MVP? It's a minimal viable product. Now, it's really important. The minimal viable product is a product that has a minimum number of features that you can sell. Mm-hmm. So a proof of concept may not be a minimal viable product because it doesn't necessarily have those minimum number of features. What it does, it shows you the potential of what you can deliver. And then you would get additional funding when you've got the proof of concept to build the minimal viable product. We also sometimes use in technology the turnkey solution. And a turnkey solution is all of the resources that you need in order for a customer to be able to onboard your technology. So I may have, let's say I'm developing a hydrogen fuel cell for a motor car. If I need somebody to test that, then I need to provide the fuel cell. I need to provide the engineering to be able to put that into the car that's being tested. I need to be able to provide the training. I need to provide the health and safety. I need to provide the hydrogen. and I need to work with a potential customer to work out what the testing is going to look like, and therefore what parameters we're going to be working at. And so my turnkey solution is all those capabilities and resources that I need to provide in order for that customer to use my technology. So when we talk about turnkey solution, that's kind of what we're talking about. Quite often when you have got a new emerging technology, you need to provide all those resources. In a more established sector, you would develop partnerships or collaborations with somebody so that they would provide that, and your customer would either work with them directly or you would bring them in together. And that's what we mean about interdependencies around how you're working. So
There's
hopefully
quite an important point here around, and the questions around the difference between a milestone and a deliverable. Certainly, I would say that deliverables are outputs, things that you get. They may be specifications, reports, pieces of work. You make a decision or something of that sort of nature. Whereas milestones are the points that you get to, the main checkpoints. You will have fewer milestones than you have deliverables, generally speaking. And in fact, in a project of this scale, you may only have two, just a couple of milestones. But they're the sanity checks. They're the just to allow the, well, actually really to allow the monitoring officer then to justify their decision or their assessment that you are doing the project that you said you were going to do and that it's actually going okay.
So Neil had some really good points here about what to capture in planning.
Yeah, that's really just a set of words. These are the first point there is, and this is where I keep on harking on about the deliverables, the key things that you get from the project. They are the dynamic bits. A Gantt chart actually, it sets out the actions, and in many ways actually that's the input. A poor Gantt chart just tells you the tasks, just tells you what's going on at any particular time, and it doesn't really tell you what's coming out of it. This is where you take an action and you get something as a result of it. You can take a different action, and this is something that frequently happens within projects. Rather than going from A to B, you go via C as well, and actually that's equally, if it's expedient, then it's equally valid. That list of points there are really just things that it's the terminology that I tend to use both as an assessor and as a monitor. And it really is just it's the confirmation that you're going on the journey that you thought you were going to go on, and that you're doing it in a deliberate way. If you get to a horizon point, you've done something, you know something more than you did previously, and you might want to change the project plan. And that's okay, because that's the nature of these things.
Yeah, and it is the reality of how projects run. Things change, businesses change. Something happens with the results that you've got, which you need to pivot. And if that happens, then that's where the monitoring officers are really great, because they're working with you, they're supporting you. They will help you in how to fill in the paperwork that needs to be reported back to Innovate UK. And they're all really experienced in this area in business, so they can also provide you some real kind of mentoring and guidance. A monitoring officer is your critical friend on multiple levels, aren't they, Neil?
Hopefully.
Yeah.
There's a question there about horizon point. Really, it's just the point, you crest a ridge and you can suddenly see what's beyond. And that really should be the nature of these projects. There should be an element of unknown about them. But that doesn't mean that you launch into them with just a wing and a prayer. You should have an idea of what lies beyond, but it's that point of clarity that you get to once you've done something, and you can think, actually, okay, we need to do something different now.
And a horizon point can be, for those of you doing something technical, could be something like these are the parameters in which this particular technology can work. So we know that for either legislative reasons or practical reasons or performance reasons, that this maybe operates within this range, and therefore all these other applications we thought we can't do, and we're limited to this particular range of applications. And that could be because there's no legislation of what to do with it beyond that range. So it could be a parameter, it could be a technical milestone you've achieved, which then opens up sort of opportunities on where you can go, who you can engage with. If you're a social enterprise, it'll maybe tell you what the limitations are of the sort of work and activities or people that you can engage with within your enterprise, because there'll be other considerations that you can't address. It could be things that you can't deal with young adults because there's some health and safety and issues around that, or ethical issues, and therefore you need to test your social enterprise has to be targeted at people who are the age of 25 plus, for example. It could be you can't go below the age of 18 because there's a barrier that you can't address at that point in time. So therefore you thought you could be testing your product or your service within a certain age group or a certain category, and now you can't do that. So by the same token, it could be that you've opened up an age group or a category because you've been able to demonstrate that it is actually suitable or applicable. So people, equipment and money is what you're allocating for each work package. So who you're doing what, when and who. We talked about logical structure to complete the task, and what's novel and high risk can also be identified, and that's particularly where the interdependencies come in. As we said, the number of work packages depends on the complexity and the time. And my big thing for you is you've only got 12 months, keep it simple, which is reiterating what Neil told us already.
What I'd do, just to go back to the first chunk of bullet points there, and certainly as an assessor, what I'd look for is that appropriate resource have been allocated to the main things, the main challenges. Either you've got some necessary preamble and what I'd regard as sort of scaffolding, if as with so much else in life, if you're working on 80-20 principle, 80% of stuff you have to do for 20% of stuff you want to do, actually that's pretty good. And it often works out the same within these projects. But I would look, if there's an absolute key step within the whole narrative and you've only allocated 2 weeks and a couple of grand to it, then I'd be thinking, hang on, there's a bit of unrealism here. This is the balance is wrong.
We have some top tips around all grant applications. We discussed them in the first workshop, but for you now is make sure you fit the scope, the way you articulate, you're fitting the scope, agree any key points and who's delivering what with any partners or collaborators or subcontractors. Do that up front. Be clear about how much money they need and how you're going to work. Be really clear and concise about what it is you're doing and how you're going to work. Have a realistic plan. It's got to be convincing, so make sure you can deliver that in context of the time and the risk that you've got. Really be clear about what the risk is in the innovation. Make sure you know how to quantify and justify any assertions you make. So remember, you're not telling us, you're showing us. So when you've talked about market sizing or activities or ranges, if you know that one of your outcomes is that you're going to have something that's, say, going to perform within you've got to be able to perform a task within 5 minutes. Otherwise, your customer's not going to be happy. Then if you've got to be able to say, I've spoken to 10 customers who've said that their performance criteria need to work is 5 minutes. So it's okay if I don't do it in a minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. What they're looking for is a reduction in time. So it's 5 minutes. And that means that it's 10 times more effective than the way they're doing it now. And that's a justification. You've spoken to somebody, you've done that. Deadlines, make sure everybody who you're working with on this knows what the deadlines are. Advice and feedback, give yourself enough time. And any questions to the Innovate UK team, give yourself enough time. If you need any reasonable adjustments, the guidance for that is on their site, and we've got newsletters and things that are there. And as we always say, is small print. It will kill you. the most important thing is make sure that what you're doing is in scope. Speak to the lead technologists at Innovate UK, speak to the competition help team if you're worried about anything on what's going on. And the other thing I'll emphasize, which we talked about yesterday, it's a really popular competition. You really need to stand out from the crowd. So just make sure, you know, there's no reason for us to say no. You know, we want to make sure that everything you've got is really as transparent, easy for us to look at, easy for us to assess, and to make a qualified score against your question. I think that's the most important thing. You know, if you don't give us the information, we can't score it. I think as an assessor, Neil, you can probably sort of respond to that.
Yeah, generally speaking, it takes me about 5 minutes to form an opinion on any particular application, and then the next 2 hours to justify it.
Yeah. And I would say, having the applications that I've read and the ones that have come to me when people have been unsuccessful, you can see almost straight away where things have sort of fallen over because they've been the weaker parts of the application. And quite often it's the areas where people have the most uncertainty and they've left it a little bit late and they've not put enough effort into that part of the application. So we're now going to move on to the Q&A. So I'm going to have a quick look through the chat and see. So I'm going to end the show. So I should stop sharing now. And let's look at the chat and what questions we've got. So what did we have? I'm going to scroll through. Recordings to the workshop 1, they are up there. Somebody's already put the link to it, but if you go to the KTN website, that recording and subsequent recordings will be on there, and you'll be able to see the slides and the narrative as well. Can you make it available to other colleagues? It'll be on a platform with a link, so you should be able to share that with colleagues. As far as I'm aware, we've made it open on the KTN website, Women in Innovation, so you should find everything easily. Certainly yesterday's was up there. What have we got here? Costs to adopt, route to market. Is this part of the project deliverables? How should I approach this? So basically, that's part of the earlier questions where you're talking about your innovation and how you're going to commercialize. So if you know that your route to market is this particular route to market, and that you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got to have certain performance criteria, then obviously the tasks and the milestones that you're going to achieve are going to help you achieve that route to market. And remember, you don't have to be reaching the market at the end of it. It's about moving you closer to that market within that time frame. Cost to adopt is something you can talk about, the barriers to entry. That could be the reason why people haven't adopted this better way of doing things. And you can also identify that as a commercial risk in your project as well. That's something you can talk about. Rachel has obviously shared with you the support at Innovate UK site, so you can link in an email through that. That's the web link. Are there any criteria for collaborators and external parties? We talked about that. If in the UK it's all fine, if you can explain why they're the best people to work with, what previous experience you've had with them. Overseas, you have to justify financially why you would need to do that. Gala, we answered your question about private investment. That's certainly part of the additionality. Just make sure your project sits within that overall deliverable. Do we need codes from people we work with? I think you need to, Nikki, you need to be clear about how much it's actually going to cost you. If it doesn't look to the assessor that you've got realistic costings to deliver, then they will see that as a weakness in your application. I mean, Neil, would you like to sort of talk a little bit about that assessment process?
Yeah, it's partly down to sixth sense. And if you're providing just enough detail to engender confidence, then that's kind of where I would suggest you go with it. You don't because of the nature of these projects, because they will change, and because you might think you've got a subcon element sitting partway through it, but the first task is coming up with a spec for that. Be realistic. Yeah. That sounds a bit of a vague response, but
Karen put a point here, which is wouldn't having private funds undermine the need for public funds? It depends what you're going to do with that funding. And remember, this application is for you, not just for you to run that project within the business. It's also about developing you as an individual. So in order to be able to exploit and get best value from those private funds, you may need to have this competition as a way of building up your persona as a future leader. So it is a balance between those two things, and it's how you're going to benefit from the whole package of support, not just the funded part of support. And I did see a question earlier on about the non-funded package. So that is actually in the competition briefing. There's a whole list of activities that are run which are not part of the 50k but are funded by Innovate UK. Good question for you, Neil from D. If you are the sole person managing a project as a micro business, how do you demonstrate making management decisions?
That's an interesting one, Dee. I think that what I'd look for there is just some sort of evidence that your decision process would be evidence-based. I know it can be, it's pointless coming up with all sorts of management tools if it's just you that's doing it. But chances are you're going to be managing subcontractors and external inputs anyway. Horses for courses, really.
Do you have a board? An advisory board is part of what you're going to do, is put together an advisory board to help you on your project. That could be one of the first things that you're going to be doing, which this program will allow you to bring somebody on board to build that team. That could be one of the big impacts that it could have for you, that exposure. So then you wouldn't be working on your own because you'd be able to get sort of that support. And those are sort of things that you might think about, because it's a lonely journey being an entrepreneur, and the more friends you've got, the better. And there are people out there who will support you, and will do that free of charge when you're starting off. Henrietta, in a grant application, it's difficult to know that one is meant to be talking about the project and one is talking about the business. When you're talking about the business, you're talking around how the innovation that's being funded, that risky R&D, is going to impact on your business and in your business goals and targets. So if your business goal and target is to be, so I don't know, hydrogen fuel cell provider for the automotive business in back to base. So how is the particular bit of project that's being funded going to help you as a business achieve that? Is it going to allow you to build a partner relationship and demonstrate that it can be delivered on a local site, for example? And then if it de-risks that business model and allows you to scale. Or it could be something really super hyper technical that I need to be able to get a device that's going to then allow me to go out and test the performance of my software, piece of hardware, and my software out in the field. But overall, that's going to allow me to sort of enter a market and work through. There is a balance, because you always have to be referring back to how this is going to move your business along, but it's about how the innovation helps you move along that. And that's why that vision map is actually a good picture, is a good way of showing what you're aiming towards, what your milestones are, what your vision, so you can see what you're going to be doing to take you towards that vision of what the future looks like. And Neil, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you encapsulated it quite nicely.
Yeah, same for Gala. Yes, your vision of a social impact of a technology can be there, but you'd have to be able to explain as well how you're going to measure that. And obviously it depends on what stage you're at. It could be data that you're collecting, with your innovation or your technology. It could be, whether it's data that's being collected on an app, in a phone, so the back end data, or it could be around data you're collecting directly from, say, health outcomes or whatever's appropriate for your innovation. And if you're not sure around that, then again, competitions team, or speak to somebody in the KTN in the technical sector you're in, who might be able to give you some advice as to what the standards are that are being used to measure some of these impacts as well within sort of communities or networks. So funds be used to develop a product from a certain TRL. Yeah, I think as long as it's in scope, then they'll be looking at that. Remember, funding is not just about the technology, it's about you, but there's got to be a risk within that technology. And you're probably realistically in 12 months unlikely to move from TRL 3 to 5 to TRL 9. You're probably going to go up one, one or two.
You mentioned the small print as well. This funding, as I understand, is de minimis.
Yeah.
And it is tagged against innovation, which would stop usually around about TRL 6, 7.
Yeah.
Just tidying things up and doing the business bits. I think it'd be difficult to fit that within the scope.
Yeah, but certainly if you're at that lower TRL 3 to 5, then moving on in 12 months will be fine. Gala, as we discussed, working under Agile, that's where the tasks and how fuzzy you make those tasks is within that. So we gave examples of work packages, MVPs we talked about. Can one of the tasks be to undertake a project without having to charge in order to test the technology? Yeah, I mean, whatever is relevant to your sector and what the norm is in your sector around doing that. Not all of the project tasks necessarily are funded within that 50K. It could be the added value that you bring in. Like if we've got this and we know that somebody said they're willing to go and test it on their site, and they're going to do that, and that's worth to us £20,000 worth of work, that's an added value that, by reaching this particular milestone where we've achieved this. So, I mean, I think, Gala, some of the questions you're asking there are probably a little bit specific to the project you're on. I don't think I can answer that. How long to complete the application, Jessica? If you're going to do it well, I think realistically, it's 6 to 8 weeks to do a good application when you've got all of the information together. I mean, that's what I advise people in a standard application. If you're starting from scratch, then, and you've never done this before, then you need to start now with the aim of finishing things in October. That's why we're running the workshops now, to give you plenty of lead time.
Not full time, not 6 to 8 weeks full time.
No, not full time, no. Yeah, but while you're doing everything else in sort of the business that you're doing, and also depends how much you're dependent on other people providing you information. And I know from other people who've collaborated that sometimes, they've really struggled to get that information. Some of the finances, for example, if you're dependent on somebody within a finance team, that can always come to the last moment. A milestone and a deliverable. Neil, do you want to pick that up?
I think we covered this earlier, but certainly I know it does come up again and again. Deliverables are what I regard as key outputs from the project. They're things that you get to, such as reports, such as test results, such as making a decision, such as having a specification. Whereas a milestone would tend to be a significant identifiable point along the journey.
That's a good answer, thank you. Cost and assigned time for personal development. Well, part of this award is for personal development, and there are things that are being offered in there which you need to describe. If you remember in the question, one of the questions specifically said, how are you going to use that portion and what's most important to you? So use that's where you would address the personal development tasks in there. and so participation in those events and that training, etc., will be part of what you'll be putting into your project plan. You can use is a Gantt chart necessary? Well, if you look at what the application wants you to do, and it makes some suggestions about what you should do. So you can use whatever format that you want. You can use a project plan or a Gantt chart, but you want to do one or the other. Which do you think is going to make it easier for an assessor?
The bits that I'd be looking for are to know what's happening, what's coming out of it, and the timescale. You know, you could use a PERT chart that has got annotations in order to do that. But, you know, that's linking tasks, that's linking dependencies and giving you key outputs. I recall, if I'd had more time to rummage around in all my files and everything, I might have come up with it. There was I think I remember a wonderful project plan from there must have been industrial or product designers. And it was a wonderful landscape thing, but you couldn't tell what was going on. You couldn't tell when things were happening. So generally speaking, Gantt charts are unfortunately the currency of this. They're the standard. They tend to work.
Another question from Gala. Yes, you can use the funding to subcontract. So it may be the money will come into your business, your company, and then you can subcontract that. But you remember, you'll be project managing that, and you'll have to show how you're going to manage all of that risk and what you're doing and why you need to do that. And we have that in quite a lot of projects. You know, if you think, you know, you're developing software development or a hardware, somebody else is probably going to be doing that. You're not necessarily going to do the hard coding yourself or go out and build the prototype. You're going to have to work with somebody else. Particularly as you need to meet the new, you know, sort of, I don't know, the CE marking if it's going to European market, or the new UK marking system. So common mistakes that applicants made last year, not that I'm aware of, it would be in confidence, but I would say the big one is not answering the question is the biggest one. It sounds really silly, but the number of applications I read where people do not answer the question, which is why I say at the very beginning, just make notes, put post-its in there, just put all the questions. That's why I've given you the keywords and the highlights, the sort of things that they're working for, because it's a tick box. You literally go, have I answered this, have I answered that, have I answered this, and refer to the guidance notes because they give you additional information to help you.
It's a couple of things here. It can be quite a good technique to take the guidance for applicants and use that as your sort of construction lines when you're doing it. Use these for the headings as you build up your own text, and then chop them all out, cut and paste it back into the submission format. In doing that, you have a danger of it looking like a set of specific answers to specific questions, and that detracts a little bit from the narrative. So what I suggest you do is put down all the headings, put down all the key points that you know you're going to be assessed against, put some response to that, and then make it work in a more coherent way. That way you know you're covering everything.
Yeah, so Rebecca, is it okay for an applicant not to be formally qualified in the technology, but use external expertise? Yeah, absolutely. Again, you need to show how you as an individual are going to use this competition to build yourself as an expert in this area, but you don't have to be the one who can do everything technically, you know, and most CEOs in a business can't do all of the work that the people who are working with them and for them do, but they bring all those skills in order to be successful. So, you know, you're driving your vision, and that's what we talk about. What is your vision for the business? So that's really important. Can all the funding go towards salaries of employees who are doing the work? If that's what it needs to go to, if you've got any queries on that, then you do need to be able to check that with the competitions team around that. I haven't looked specifically on how they've broken down the finance for this particular application, so I wouldn't want to comment directly. Zoe, is it okay if the product is manufactured outside of the UK, if the grant will be funding the elements of this, but providing the product to people in the UK? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know realistically, though we'd like to have all manufacturing onshored, we absolutely would prefer, prefer it to be onshored, but also we know there is a finance issue and a skills, capabilities and resource issue around that. But that, depending on what the product is, you may also want to think about what impact that might have on your ability to sell in the UK or European market, depending on the country you're in. What kind of criteria you'd need to have in the person who's manufacturing and why you're choosing that route as well. So that, for you, is a kind of part of your project business risk assessment, is thinking about those kind of questions. There's a question here about having received in the COVID response. It's very simple. You can't be funded twice for the same project through a different funding route. So it has to be something new and different. So if you've had funding for this project before, and for this particular task and activity within the project, then no, because that's double dipping. If it's a new piece or element or something that you have to do different that feeds into it, that allows you to execute, that you found out through that funding, then this is around that additionality. So have you seen in questions 1 and 2, you have to give a certain amount of information. What you can do then is say how this is building on that funding you got in that COVID response, which is going to allow you to execute more quickly, answer questions, move forward, address a challenge, technical challenge you found or whatever. So just be aware of that. And if you've got any questions around that, competitions team will help you. They can clarify that sort of area, because we don't want you to spend all this time putting something in and then to have missed that opportunity of articulating your innovation.
But basically, my understanding certainly is that the Fast Start projects, the COVID response ones, were pretty quick hit, and I've seen certainly quite a few of the ones that I had that I was monitoring there. They were coming up with they was taking them to a fresh horizon point, and therefore, if you can then properly articulate the "if only we could" point, then there should be no impediment to. There's nothing specific about not being a subsequent rather than follow on, I would say, but it would need to be a subsequent development, a subsequent innovation.
So Isabella, what will happen if you think your project will finish before 12 months and might cost slightly more than 50k? Well, you can only apply for 50k and it's for a 12-month program, so you need to be in scope basically. So you need to have to work out how you can make that in scope. If you're not sure, then do speak with the competitions team around what can happen. Some projects do come to a natural finish a lot more quickly because you achieve certain milestones and deliverables more quickly, but there's always more work to be done within that program of work. So have a chat with that. Shiwan, has anything like that happened in any previous projects where it's projects are finished sooner?
So what I would say is projects always overrun in time scales. If you think you're going to finish it in 9 months, the likelihood is that you'll probably finish it within 12 months anyway. So do make sure that you're building flexibility within your project time scales as well to make them a little bit more realistic. You also got that personal development aspect of it. So, in the 12 months of the project, are 3 months of them going to be developing you personally, your skills, you being a speaker, you actually emphasizing that business in a little bit of a greater way. You've got that flexibility to add that in to increase the timescales. In terms of additional project costs, then one of the things that you might be looking for is to raise additional funding. One of the beauties of the Women in Innovation program is that you'll get investor readiness support, grant writing help and support and advice as you go through the project. You'll get an innovation growth specialist who will point to you in the direction of investors, and will also point you in the direction of other funding options for you. So if you think you may need additional funding and some of them maybe need to develop further based on additional funding, you can always build that into the the package of support and the program will benefit me in the fact of I would, be looking for investors and would need help with investor readiness and introductions and connections, or I will use my innovation growth specialist to actually help me identify further funding opportunities. So the beauty of this project is that you can actually write this within the project plan, in terms of, yes, you might need additional funding elsewhere to help you complete all of the aspects, but that's part of where the benefit of the support package will come into play.
Thanks, Shiwan. And if your project is not particularly innovative, e.g. market mapping, but it's vital for the innovative business as a whole, would that be okay? Well, as Shiwan said, the work packages, what you're doing are quite broad, but there does have to be a risk in that sort of innovation. So you may want to think about that. Market research per se is not an innovative project.
Yeah, I'll come back to my earlier point about just doing it, not quite cutting it.
And by the way, I'm loving all these questions. I know we've overrun by quite a bit, so I hope everyone's okay with that. But we do want to answer everything as we go along. Personal development objectives and milestones in the Gantt chart. I don't think it hurts to show very clearly how you're going to use the additional support and resources that are made available by Innovate UK and this award, making it really transparent about how you're going to use them and how they fit into what you're trying to do. As I've said, this competition is about you as a future leader, as an innovator, as a role model, as well as you being an entrepreneur and developing your business and your technology. So it's just going to make it really obvious to the assessors that you've got a very, very clear vision about how you're using all of that funding that's available. Assessors know straight away whether somebody just wants some money or whether they want the community and the benefit of that peer-to-peer support. And it's really, really important that you explain why you. It's such a competitive and very popular grant that you really do need to stand out and be as clear and transparent as possible. Yes, all of this support is available, is actually in the application, Chen. So if you haven't read that, then that's where it is. It's in the competition brief. There's also a frequently asked questions that is being constantly updated. Rachel's working on on those as they come in from the applicants and from sitting in and listening into this these webinar series. So we are building on those as well as we go along. So just keep on having a look at what's in there. And if you look at the original briefing video for the competition, I think that also lists out quite a lot of the information around what's in and out of scope. And there's quite a lot of video material from previous award winners. Shiwan, I think, has actually posted those up now, where they can share advice to applicants about their experiences. It's very much about that peer-to-peer support and learning. So if you know them, any of them, or you're applying and they might be relevant to you, look them up, send them a connection through LinkedIn and just say you're applying and could I have some help, please. I'd be surprised if they say no. Shiwan, anything more to add on that? The previous work?
No, there is, as part of the briefing event, we did invite 4 of our previous award winners there to really discuss from their opinion what support has helped them. There's loads of brochures. So we produced one, not last International Women's Day, the year before, which listed 30 stories of previous award winners and finalists and how they've been supported. So read through this, the stories, listen to all of the advice that they share, because that gives you a real in-depth flavour of how the award is tailored very much to them. And if you can't see something that you think you would really, really value from, it's likely that the programme can can provide that as well. So you can always put in your application, I would benefit for support for XYZ, which I hope the Women in Innovation programme will be able to offer, because it is a tailored package of support, which is tailored around the individual.
Thanks for that, Shuan. I think we've gone through all of the questions that were in the chat. So at that point, I'm going to say, first of all, thank you to Neil, my co-host, monitoring officer extraordinaire, who has been fantastic. And I know he's provided a lot of support and information for some other programs. And yeah, take on board everything he says, because that is definitely a voice of a lot of practical experience in there. Thank you to Shuan for sort of popping in and giving us some more information, and to Rachel, who sadly has had to leave, for her feedback from Innovate UK. And thank you to all of you for being so interactive and staying on in this recording for so long. We've still got over half of you still with us. Do go back. These will be posted as soon as possible. I'm not sure if they're posting the slides up or not. I have provided them, but I'm not sure whether that's being done on the website or not. But you'll have everything obviously with the recording. So good luck, everybody. For those of you next week, we'll see you for the third session. But it's lovely to have you all online, and have a really good weekend.